Today we actually get the engine completely out of the bike. The first thing I did was look at serial numbers on the frame. JSAAJ47AR2103611, making it a 94. I've just rubbed the dirt off this odometer, and 1687 kilometres. I hope that's true. We'll see whether the speedo cable's been connected up or how long it's been disconnected for. Who knows? That's I wish I had a bore and a piston to check that sort of wear level on, but gosh, that might be quite positive that this crankcase, if it hasn't got metal all the way through it, the bearings should have very little wear. I've got the back of the bike lifted off the ground about 200 millimeters, 8 inches for you Yanks, and I've lifted it just with a ratchet strap hooked up to the beam across my hoist there, and that's my truck up there on the hoist. I'm going to rattle these back wheels off. I think I can see that there's a nut missing on this side, and something's wrong on the other side too when I get down and have a look at it. There's a couple of observations when I took this wheel off. This wheel's been slotted out for some reason. I just wonder whether it's been fitted to a different quad bike to be made fit, possibly for a temporary arrangement. Back on the hub, this whole axle is clunking up and down. You can see that shocker mount there. Rubber must be gone completely. The wheels seem to rock around a little bit on this, as if this hub was moving in its bearing. That's the corner off. I'll go and have a look at the other side. Yeah, only 3 nuts on this wheel also, and normally there's washers on those nuts, no washers. So with the slotted wheel, it's not a very good situation. Well, at least I've got 4 lug nuts on this side, but that shocker rubber is missing or gone or buggered. Why both of them would be knackered, I don't know. This hub probably feels a little bit better than the other one. What else can I see on this side? This is the harness, the wiring loom. That's the tail light, and this is where the plug for the accessory or trailer that hooks in up here goes. That's been cut off, and the wires are poorly connected there. I need to remove that joint there and get rid of that before I try and do anything with the electrics on this bike. There's a vent hose off the brake drum there, which looks like it's caked up or blocked off. It normally joins to that hose there, which goes right up to the snorkel to prevent water getting into the brake drum. The brake drum's normally fairly well sealed. If it's newer, it's got a seal around here. It's designed to try and keep the water out of the brake drum. That brake drum's turning at least. I thought, well, I think initially when we were trying to drag it out of the Chook shed, the back wheels weren't turning. Now they are, and it feels okay. So that drum will probably come off easy enough. I've also got, that's the rear brake cable there running through to the clevis over there on the pedal. The handbrake cable's still intact here. Got those things to remove and the shocker. I've got to remove the wishbone, the trailing arm, suspension arm there, to be able to pull the axle out to then get to the motor. So that's where I'm heading next. Okay, I've been working on releasing the cable from the activation lever there for the rear drum brake. That hub turns freely and not when the brake's on. So that drum is working without me even looking at it. The clevis here went through the end of this lever with a little R-clip, and so I popped that out, and then this bracket is bolted to the side of the drum, back of the drum down there with 2 screws. I've released that. I've also released a hose that was down here that went from there up to this bracket. It had a plug in the end of it, and if your drum brake gets full of water, you can release that bracket from up here, drop the hose down, take the bung out, and water will drain out of the brake drum. That probably hasn't been a problem with this bike in this area. I've also put a bit of yield bolt release on there, and there on the sprocket, on the shocker, and at the back here where the swing arm meets the chassis, both sides, in preparation for taking those bolts out to remove the whole rear wishbone. I'm going to move around the front there and give the front bolts a bit of a spray and go and find myself a 14mm ring spanner to work in conjunction with the 14mm impact. See how I go getting those wishbones off. Okay, I've moved around the front here, and this footrest, I'd like to remove it, and the brake pedal here. I'll remove the rear brake cable from the pedal and the handbrake cable clevis from the pedal, but the pedal won't come out because it's hitting on this footrest. I'd like to remove the footrest. Now the footrest's held in place by 4 bolts, 2 at the front on each side and then 2 just at the rear on each side. I've got the one out the other side there, you can see. The one on this side is putting up some resistance. I've sprayed them all before I attempt to remove them, and I'm giving that one a bit longer to soak. Down the bottom here, I've removed the bolt that goes through this rubber bearing mount for the wishbone. It came out fine with 2 14mm spanners. I couldn't get the impact in there. I probably could have if I had the footrest out of the way. And I removed the nuts off both ends of the shocker here. I'm leaving those bolts in place at the moment because it's holding the wishbone up. I'm going to go around the back and get that rear one done, and then move around the other side to start on the other wishbone, and then I'll come back and give this one another go. It's just an M8 bolt with a 12mm head. You know, I could put a bigger impact on it, my big version, but it would probably just shear the bolt the way it feels at the moment. My little impact here that's currently fitted with the 14mm socket is not touching it, it's rattling its head off, not undoing it. So I would prefer to try a bit of heat and stuff on it, because if it shears off I've got to put heat and stuff on it later anyway. It's easier if I can get it to move while there's still a bolt in place. So move on and release these wishbones and the shockers and come back to that footrest. Okay, I've just pulled the suspension arm out. Came out of this clevis here and out of this clevis here, and the rubber boot that was over this universal joint. It's split and damaged, but it just sort of pulled off. The half shaft itself just pulled out of the boot, and that arm is now on the ground. Seeing paint on these UniJoints is encouraging, and the joints themselves shiny. So there hasn't been a lot of water get into those, even though they're split. As I said, I think this is run around in fairly dry country. And so those UniJoints are brand new. If that speed, if that mileage or kilometre reading on the odometer is real, these joints won't have done a lot of work. So that's pretty damn positive. You know, the rest of the side of the engine looks like it's covered in shit, but I was talking about how some of this material on the frame almost looks like bloody concrete or cement. But look, I suppose it's not. I'm rubbing that off with my finger. And be interesting what it looks like when I clean it up. Last night I rubbed the serial number back. I've got a better picture of that, so I'll include in this video. And yeah, so I'll take the other side off now. Okay, I've dropped that other arm down. I've flipped it over so that the shaft itself's not sitting on the ground. This boot doesn't look particularly damaged, and it's still got its original clip on the top there, which I've just released by undoing a little pair of folded pieces at this end and folding that back. Now I've slipped that off the joint, and now expecting that boot will pull away, which it is there. And so no holes in that boot that I can see, and still intact. So look, I suspect that's original. I didn't know I hadn't seen an original boot or how they fitted. I'll look into getting replacements that are similar to that. I hadn't certainly seen anything like that on my original bike. The 96 I've got's got boots on it. I hadn't really looked closely at those, but it's a bit different when you're actually taking something apart and can get a proper eyeball on it. But look, there appears to be white. Look, there's white grease in there, so the dirt just has not got into these joints at all. And which is bloody marvellous, because no water, no dirt, it's brand new. I just knocked a bit of dirt off around the frame there, put a bucket under there to catch some of it. I think there's a few shovelfuls of dirt on this bike. That'll all come off in time. I've actually removed the handbrake cable out of the frame here, and the rear foot brake cable out of there, and removed the cable altogether. I've unplugged this thermo fan sensor, and I'm now moving on to the carburetor. I've pulled the fuel line off here and 2 vacuum lines off there, and the plastic fitting there. One of them goes to the fuel pump. I think that one there goes to the fuel pump, and this one here goes to the vacuum operated petcock. So those two. This carby's got another vacuum. It's got a vent pipe. The pipes on this side of the centre of the carburetor are vacuum pipes, and these are vent pipes. there's one there. There's just the one on this one. Some carbies have got one on each side. I don't think this one does that. I think it's just this one. This vent pipe goes all the way up to the near the petrol cap there. I'm not seeing it there at the moment, but that's where it runs. And I'm at the stage now where I'm going to remove this cover on the side and release the throttle cable here and then get onto the choke cable. Okay, I've removed the cover there, and this is the idle adjuster. It just unscrews right out of the carburetor. It operates on the edge of this flap and just adjusts the position of the butterfly by pushing on there. I'm just unscrewing that completely at the moment. It's coming out easy. There's a spring on there. I believe there's an O-ring in there somewhere as well. We'll see if there was an O-ring, it might have just dropped off, but or a washer might have dropped off. I'll go looking for that. That's the problem with trying to film these things when you've got one hand and not great vision. Anyway, that's the idler out, and I don't know where that little, I'm sure there's at least a washer that may have fallen off there just then. I heard something clack away. Now the throttle cable here wraps around here and goes to this brass fitting, so you need to wind this around and pop this brass fitting out the side to release that cable. I certainly can't do that with one hand, so you're going to have to work that one out yourself. That's the little brass fitting that came out then. The cable is retained in the big end of that, and you once the end of the cable comes out, which is only that size, it'll pull up through this hole. There's an O-ring associated with that fitting as well. I don't think it's on there, it may still be in the hole there. But that's the throttle cable released. Now we're left with the choke cable. Choke cable has a 12mm plastic fitting into the side of the carburetor, which is very difficult to undo. You need a very thin open-ended 12mm spanner, which often people grind down. You sometimes can get it with a pair of long-nose pliers. I'm going to try the pliers method first. If it's still tight from factory, I might need to do something better than that, but let's have a go. Well, the long-nose pliers method worked for me then, and I'm just pulling that plunger out. It's attached to the end of the cable. Now that is a little bit different to what I'm used to. I'm not used to seeing a pin on the end of that, so this is new to me. I'm going to release that off the end of the cable. Again, there's like a key slot somewhere in the end of that. There it is there. You can see the end of the cable in that hole, and it just comes out sideways, which releases the tip and the spring and the bushing. It all just comes off, which is probably a good thing. You don't want that floating around in the dirt while you pull the engine out. So that's what I'm doing next. That choke, and I call it a choke, it's actually not a choke. This governs. A choke normally works with the air. This works with the fuel. You know, the end of the cable comes through into that hole. The spring that spring comes down over that hole, holds the cable in there, and the bushing, the 12mm across the flats bushing comes out, and there's a rubber grommet over the end that seals onto the cable. So they're the parts of the, I call it a choke. I think the book talks about it as a starter. I think it provides more fuel when the bike's starting. So that's how that works. I call it a choke cable. It's probably a starter cable. Now I've got the carby away. Choke goes in that hole. I might put that those parts of the choke back in there, and I might even put the parts of the throttle back in there and put the cover on to keep this together. That's a dodgy screw in that clamp, I believe. It's probably not the original clamp, or it may be, I'm not sure. There are variations that have happened over time. This is a Mikuni carburetor. There's others that there's the part number on the side, E3X2 19BA. So, but I'm pretty familiar with the guts of those from the other two bikes, and got to check that these rubber fittings, that's the fitting that bolts down onto the cylinder. There's an O-ring missing out of there, big O-ring missing. You got to check that there's no air leaks on that, and no air leaks on the vacuum lines. This vent line I don't think is as important. I think vents the carburetor up to an area on the dash, so if you happen to be riding it in water or something, the carby is vented still. So I'll throw that into a box for later. While I'm sitting here, that's the starter motor, and the positive comes onto this side, and the frame negative goes onto the bolt on this side. Now the support on this side of the other motor is broken, and the support on this side is broken. I'm going to remove those two bolts and the power cord there, and pull that starter motor straight out this way. That's the starter motor. It came out easy. So the mounts that are broken on the other engine is this one and this one. They almost look like they're tacked on. There's an afterthought on this case. Fairly fragile. There's a web underneath this piece, but it's only a thin web, and a thin web at the front of it. And this one in this light almost looks like a spacer sitting on top of the rest of the casting. But then this valley through here, you can see how it can collect crap, and there's a hell of a build-up of crap through there on that other engine, and corrosion there, and the nose up here was broken away. So this one in that area is fine, and the starter itself turns in your hands, terminal's clean. It's got brushes in it, so you can hear the brushes running. I suspect if I connected to that the power, it would spin up, and so that's good. I'm going to release these two knobs, and I think the speedo or odometer cable will be attached to the bottom of the odometer over there, and a illumination light. And then this panel should lift off. These have got a little screw in the end, and you can see the one in the end. That's a red knob, believe it, and this is the blue one. But they're just black with dirt at the moment. So I'm going to release those, see how I go. The odometer was not connected, so who knows how long it's been disconnected. This bike's had a hard life if it's only done less than 2,000 kilometres to get as filthy as it is and for it to blow up the engine. But then when you see a universal joint that looks good, well, it could have been replaced, I suppose, but who knows. Now I'm going to release the ends of these cables here and here. Going to be then able to pull all of that out of the bike. They go through the bulkhead here with a couple of big nuts. That gets this out of here, which is just sort of in the way. It's got to probably come out at some point anyway, so let's do it now. We're starting to see some wood for the trees. Front engine mount normally has a rail between here and here that has a pickup for the bolt that runs through the centre there off the side of this. So that's been taken out, and that cross member there also has an arm sticking forward that the supports the end of the gear shift lever, the end of the gear shift cable. So as I said, that's been removed by others, and I'm sure they're floating around somewhere. The stator has been unplugged from this connection, again done previously. This purple wire is a bodgy thing. I'm guessing because it's on the reversing switch or the and connected to the neutral. The neutral switch plugs in here and the reversing switch plugs in there. That might be, if that's earthed out, it probably gives you a neutral light which lets the starter solenoid fire so that you can start it not in neutral, which can be a useful thing at times, but unnecessary if you've got your neutral situation. People who drive them into mud don't know what gear they're in, particularly if the neutral switch isn't working. Next, I need to detach the speedo cable. There's a screw in the front there that's got a pin on it that releases something inside, and there's a rubber cap at the top that you push up out of the way, and then there's a section below that that twists off. Okay, I was turning this whole thing here and it was just spinning on that O-ring. That pin that I took out goes in there and locks this section to the base. What happens is that unscrews from there, and that's all I was trying to unscrew. And so I think this bit needs to go back in the bike, and that just hang on the end of the cable now. I think this holds maybe a worm wheel or something in the holder there. So I'll put that back in and put the pin back in. Okay, I think I've got all of the wires and pipes disconnected. I've tied all of the cables and wires up there, the ones that are on the motor themselves, from the reversing switch and the temperature sensor and the stator and the neutral switch. I've just tied together on the motor so they don't catch on anything. Now, the next thing I'm looking at, which might make things easier and to take out now rather than later, is to pull these UniJoints out. I'll come back to you when I've done that, but then it's time to release the rear of the motor. The front of it's been released, and hopefully it'll swing out. Removing this cap here, for some reason, is recommended to make clearance when you're getting the engine out. Now, I don't really understand. They could say remove the oil filler. Now, that may be only when you've got the cylinder head on, but I think they say you can remove the engine with the cylinder head on. It's this cap that can be the problem. Now, taking that off, it seems like a minor thing, whether it's just about lifting it up here to break it out of those junctions. You lift it and it hits on there because it can't lift far enough, is about the only reason that would make any sense there. Anyway, what am I going to do? I'm going to knock those UniJoints out. Yeah, a couple of big screwdrivers, levered those out, and a little bit of persuasion with a BFH, but they're out. And I was just thinking, I don't know whether there's any oil left in this motor, so I'll drop the two sump plugs out next. Okay, well, I've got the bolts out the rear, and I've used a couple of levers under the back there to lift the back up out of those mounting points. I think the reason they say this oil cap should be removed is that it needs to come up and would foul on there in the lift. But she also hits around the front here on the case with this front mount, and so the front's got to go out. It's got to find its way out the side there. It's a tight bloody fit. I don't know. I don't think at the moment it can go back anymore. I certainly can't film it while I'm juggling it, so that just perhaps gives you an idea of how tight a fit it is. There appears to be no room down the back, no room at the front, and she's got a twist enough to clear at least this front here to get out the frame. So let's see how we go. I'm going to remove thermocouple thermo fan switch because I think it could get in the way there. Okay, that's it out on the ground. That is one hell of a juggle. Millimetres to spare to get that to swing through the frame. I took the rubber bungs out of the end here to give it a little bit more clearance to twist in the rear mount area. Tied that rope around it to give it a lifting point, and hung on to the cylinder head studs at the front to swing the front at the same time. But it's out. I think that's probably all I'm going to do today. If you're still awake, like and subscribe, and then get out to your shed and have some fun yourself.